Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second lecture of where we are going to look at some applications of all the techniques that you've been reading so far. Okay, so this is going to be something slightly different, not normally something that we encounter in our physics textbooks, but I thought it would be relevant, especially because we are in a pandemic situation now, and it really helps, I think, to understand a bit about how you can mathematically model the progression of disease and what it means when you have vaccinations, or what it means when you have social distancing and so on. So we see these words talked about a lot, but today we are going to try and mathematically see the real effect of, well, real this the simulated effect of having these things. Okay, so let's start. So I'll start by first explaining the title a bit. So the second part, you know what differential equations are, and we've been actually working with couple differential equations already, because remember when we had this second order differential equation, what we did was, we, instead of having just one variable x, we called x dot as v, and then we had two differential equations, one for x and one for v, where x depends on dx by dt depends on v, and dv by dt depends on x, right? So that means that they are,
Madam,
yeah,
madam, sorry to interrupt. Can
yeah,
you just enlarge screen
okay,
size, fonts,
okay,
so that it's readable?
yeah. Is this better?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Yeah, so we've been talking about coupled differential equations already, so that is why I've put it in the second part of this. And in the beginning, we are going to learn about this concept called cellular automata, which is an idea that very, very simple rules can lead to very complex behavior. Okay, so this is something that became popular once computers started becoming popular, and these kinds of models you could write very easily. So let's just get into it rather than talking about it a lot. Okay, so the first part you'll recognize is essentially just importing certain things. The next thing I will remind you, if you have not, if you don't remember, is about the uniform probability distribution. Okay, so this is something that we are going to use quite a lot. And the uniform distribution is essentially just a flat distribution. Say you have an interval between A and B on the x-axis, then the probability of having any number between A and B is the same. Okay, and then because you want the full integral of your probability distribution over the entire limit to be 1, it gives you this normalization factor, 1 upon b by a, and this becomes your probability distribution. And if your a is 0 and b is 1, then the probability distribution is just 1, right? So it's just 1 everywhere. And this distribution has a very useful property, which is that the probability of getting any x less than a fixed x naught is x naught. So what does that mean? So probability of getting x less than 0.5, if you pick out random numbers out of this probability distribution, probability of getting x less than zero point 0.5 is zero point 0.5. Probability of x less than zero point 0.7 is zero point 0.7. Any number that you want. So if you don't believe me, we can try this. So you've worked with this before. You have this random number generator, which gives you random numbers, uniform random numbers between 0 and 1. And we want what is this, 100,000, 1 lakh of 1 lakh of those. And let's pick x0 or some number, so 0.43, and we count how many the number of x zeros that are less than 0.43. Okay, so you loop over all of this x. If your value in the x array is less than this x0, then you count, and then but since you've counted the number, the probability is essentially this total count divided by the length of the array. So that's what you print. I've rounded out to 2 digits just for ourselves. and you see that it comes out to be the same number, and you can try it with this, with anything you want. Okay. So if you reduce this number, then it might not be always so nice. So you might have jumping around a bit. Okay. Every time you run, you will have a different number. But if you use large enough sample size, then you should get a pretty accurate answer. Okay. So this is the property that we are going to use to generate numbers by that follow any distribution that we want. Okay. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if you want to find numbers that follow the Gaussian distribution, that means you are going to a lot of times you're going to get the numbers very close to the mean, and few amount of times you're going to get the numbers that are in the tails, right? So if you have a collection of numbers that looks like this, then you can say that this set of numbers follows a Gaussian distribution. So we are going to use this property that I just talked about of the uniform distribution to essentially get numbers from any distribution that you want. Okay, so let's try it with a simple example. So let's say this is your distribution that you want to so this should be actually. So this is your distribution. Let's say you can check that it's normalized if it's between 0 and 1. Okay, so first let us see what this function looks like. So we know how to do that. We can just get some numbers on the real line between 0 and 1. And we can define the function which gives the value, and we can just plot it. Okay, so I need to do something better. So plot. So let's try. Okay. All right. So you can see that this is what the function looks like. It's 0 at x equal to 0, and it is 0 at x equal to 1, and it has a maximum at x equal to half. Okay. So this is different from the uniform distribution, but it is still between 0 and 1. So if you want to find numbers that follow this distribution, what would we expect? That you would expect a lot of numbers between 0.4 and 0.6, and not so many, say, between 0 and 0.1 or 0.9 and 1. Okay, so we want to do that, and the way of doing this is using this method called acceptance rejection method. Okay, so the idea is that you first start with a large array of random numbers. So again, I'm choosing 1 lakh, and you only keep the numbers when the function. So this is the function that you want to reproduce, right? F of x. So f of x is greater than a random number that you draw. Okay, so this is essentially using this property that we talked about, that probability of x less than x0 is x0. So what I'm doing here is saying that probability of how many times should I get 0.2? So the probability of getting 0.2 is this essentially 0.3, or rather, let's say if your max is 0.5, then 0.3 by 0.5, right? So that's the number of, so this is the probability of getting this is, say, 1, and the probability of getting this is 0.3 by 0.5. So similarly, you can so this overall normalization, it doesn't really matter. It just matters what your relative values are. So if this is 0.3 by 0.5, then this is 0.4 by 0.5, this is 0.5 by 0.5, and so on. But I could have as well just divided it by 1 and said that this is 0.3, this is 0.4, this is 0.5, and so on. So that is what we are doing here. So we are saying that the probability of getting that number is the same as the functional value of that number. Okay. And then we only accept those that follow that. And we can check how many were selected. and we can plot the histogram for that. So first of all, I'm plotting the histogram of the 1 lakh random numbers that we had in bins of 100. And then I'm plotting the histogram of the selected numbers that we had. Okay. And just to compare, what I'm plotting is also f of x. Okay. And I've multiplied it by 1,000 because we have these 1 lakh points and 100 bins. So 1 lakh by 100 is 1,000. So that's just a normalization factor. Okay. So we can plot this, and you can see that uniform distribution is as expected. All numbers between 0 and 1 have a probability distribution of 1. And the black line is the functional form that we plotted before, and the orange are the selected points. So you're selecting points exactly by the same probability distribution as you expect. Okay. So yeah, so this is something very useful in trying to generate numbers according to any probability distribution that you want. So I will pause here before we get into the main thing. Are there any questions so far? Because this is quite fundamental.
Can you show the code of selecting this?
Yes. So the code is just simply this. You draw a random number and you demand that this random number is less than the functional value. So this is your x naught in this case. So probability of x less than x naught is equal to x naught. So that means you're selecting it with the probability of f of x.
Ma'am, can
So
you
it
please
actually,
explain me?
yeah. Yeah.
Can you please explain
So
in
it will-
short like that? Why we
Yeah.
want
So
less
actually,
value?
yeah. So actually, yeah, let's make it more efficient, which will make it even more general. So what you actually want is this quantity, f_val by f by f max. Okay. So in our case, let's say f max is 0.5. So the plot is going to look a bit different now because the normalization changes, but let's do this anyway. So you can see that f by f max is the probability of getting any number that you have, right? So that is what I said. So if you have 0.5, then the probability of getting 0.5 is 0.5 by 0.5, that's 1. So if you generate 0.5, you're always going to accept. If you generate 0.2, then some of them you're going to have to throw away. Only some of them you're going to accept. And what is the fraction that you're going to accept? Which is f of 0.2 divided by the maximum, which is 0.5 here. So that gives you the probability of accepting 0.2. If you generate 0.8, again, the probability is f of 0.8 divided by the maximum. So it's like a square here that you need to generate. Maybe it will help if I show one more example. Just give me a second. I'll find it on my computer. There's another example that I have.
Okay, so, can we say something like this? Let me read out my understanding that xrand gives you a number from 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Any random number.
Yeah, but distributed uniformly.
Uniform
Yeah.
distributed number.
Yeah.
Now what we are saying is we have generated that particular array once.
Mm-hmm.
Now you are picking one value from that, right? You are picking one particular value from that, and then you are saying that
for each value on that, not one particular value,
yeah,
for each value in that.
For each value. So you pick up the first value of that, okay, and then that first value could have been 0.7, it could have been 0.8, it could have been
Exactly.
0.2, it could be anything.
Yes.
Now you are again generating a random number with this next line, if np random.rand. Okay, so this is a new random number generated, and if this new random number is less than the first value that you picked up from your first list, then you are going to put that in the xselect array, right?
No, so it's not the first value, it's the function of the first value.
Okay,
So
the function of the first
yeah.
value.
So
Yeah.
for each value, this is what we are doing. For each
Fine.
value in X that we generated, we are asking, is this value to be accepted or rejected?
Okay. So so every time within the loop, you are also generating a new random number.
Yes.
With that if condition.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you are checking whether it is smaller than the function of the first random number that you had already generated.
Yeah. So we could actually also do something. So this was just a shortcut, but what you can also do, for example, is make a list that looks like this. And so on, right? And then you can ask how many of the 0.1s are you going to keep, how many of the 0.2s are you going to keep, and so on. So this list is not important that it is random.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it can be a list of just values. I just used a shortcut where we generated them randomly. Right. Okay. So yeah. So I wanted to show you.
You could have used that line space there also. In place of random.rand.
No, but it doesn't fully work that way, because you just have one. Let's try. Let's see what
0
happens.
to 1 and say 1 lakh.
Let's try what happens. I think there is possibly a problem because you don't have enough coverage, but let's try. Uh, 0 to 1. The problem with linspace is that it's going to produce. Yeah, it works. See, it works even with linspace. The normalization is now different because let me remove this
Divided
Fmax.
by Fmax.
Yeah. So
yeah, good, excellent.
Yeah. Okay, good. So let me put the Fmax back in. And the other example, let me show you. So this is something that, so I can share this with you as well, if you think that is interesting. So this is an example of finding pi by comparing areas of circle and square. Okay, so this is actually the same idea, where so you know that, yeah.
Ma'am, in the previous question, what was the difference if if we are dividing the functional value by Fmax? I mean, and why did the graph change like that?
So yeah, so let me explain this example, then it will become clear what was the function of having Fmax. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, so in this case, right, so if we have a square and a circle with the radius equal to half the size of the square so that it fits into the square, then we know that the area of the square is going to be, so let's say the area is, the radius is r, then the area of the square is r square by 4, right? Because it's r by, so sorry, so it's 4r square, right? So it's r 2r one side, so it's 4r square is the area of the square, and the area of the circle is pi r square. So if you take the ratio of the circle to the square, then you're supposed to get pi by 4. So you can use this simple idea to calculate the value of pi. So what you're doing is you're just getting some random numbers. You are changing. So this is between 0 and 1, right? You want them to fall between -1 and 1. So the way you do it is you say, so you shift it to center. So instead of going from 0 to 1, you're going to shift it to -1, that's the minimum, and then multiply by 2 to get the normalization, right? So this is the normalization. And let's get a smaller number. So you'll see first what is going on. So you see that there are some, so the orange ones are the ones that are inside the circle, and the blue ones are the ones that are not in the circle, but still in the square. Okay, so with 100, you can't see anything, see any shape. With 10,000, maybe you will start to see a little bit of the shape, right? And you can ask what is the fraction of, so how do you calculate how many of them fall inside the circle? You just calculate x square plus y square and demand that it is less than 1 because your radius was 1. So you can find what the length of the number of points falling inside is and divide it by the total length of the whole array, of the whole number. And this will give you some value. You can see it's not very accurate yet because you don't have enough points. You increase the number of points and you get a better answer, right? You keep increasing the number of points, you get better and better answer. Right, so essentially this has to do with the fact of ratio of areas. Okay, so we saw that the ratio of areas gives you, you can use the number of points falling inside and outside to get the ratio of areas. And that is exactly what we are trying to do here as well. So when we divide by Fmax, what we are saying is that this square, rather than going up to 1, is going only up to here, right? So if the square is just, the square is smaller, so you are not going to waste as many points by falling outside the area that you want. So that was why having Fmax changed your curve, because now you used all of the available curve rather than just this one. So what you would have to do is, to get the right curve again, you would have to divide by Fmax. And then it would look the same. So is that clearer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good.
Ma'am,
Right.
one more thing.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you said that we wouldn't get the same if we use line space.
No, we
Uh,
do. We checked,
Yes,
right?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am, we did. Ma'am, what is the difference between calling numbers from random.rand and from line space?
So from line space, you will, so you can print out what line space looks like. So let's do this, and we can say, well, let's not have 1 lakh points. That's way too many. Okay, so you have something. Let's not worry about that. And you can say print. You can see what it looks like. It looks like just a real number line. It's 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, all the way up to 1. So it's just a linear list of, an ordered list of numbers. Whereas if you had the previous case, let's comment this out. And you still have numbers between 0 and 1, but they are jumbled up. So you don't know which number you will get next.
Okay, ma'am. Understood.
Just a
Ma'am?
clarification.
Yeah.
Since you've already generated the random numbers once, you have already generated the random numbers in the first place. So from each bin, you can use your condition and choose how many of those random numbers should be retained to satisfy this condition, and rest you drop, and then you'll get the same curve, I guess.
Yeah. You can do the binning first and then ask. That is also fine. The reason I wanted to show it this way is that this acceptance rejection method is quite powerful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So whether you want to do it bin by bin or number by number is entirely up to you.
Ma'am, so we are generating few random numbers and plotting their probability of generation. What we are doing, I'm not getting it.
We are not plotting their probability of generation. We are transforming what was a uniform probability distribution to a different distribution. Right? So when you say I'm drawing some Gaussian random numbers, what does that mean? So so this curve is not Gaussian, but let's assume that it is Gaussian. It looks a little bit similar. So when you're drawing something from a Gaussian, it means that you have a large probability of getting the numbers that are close to the mean, and a small probability of getting numbers that are away from the mean. Right?
Yeah.
So that is essentially what we've done now. So if you look at this X select array, then by plotting how many of each kind we have, the X select array has a large probability of getting numbers near 0.5 and a small probability of getting numbers near 0 or near 1.
Yeah.
So that's all this plot shows.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, the function given that px 1 by b minus c is probability density function, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Good. So now let's go to the main problem that we wanted to do today, and that problem has to do with how do you model diseases. Okay. So to set up the problem, I would like to show you some visualization first. Okay. So let me actually go to something later on, and we'll come back to what we are doing. Okay, so so I'm showing you the result first because I want to motivate what we are trying to do. Okay, so suppose you are modeling the population by a square grid like this. Okay, each gray square box, each box is a person. Each gray box is a person that is healthy. It's not been infected. It's just a normal person. Okay. Each blue box is a person who has been vaccinated against the disease, and each red box is a person who has been infected with the disease. Okay, so what this box is showing you, which you will realize when we talk about the mathematics a bit more, is that maybe the first person got infected somewhere around here, and then the people nearby got infected little by little. Okay. People who are vaccinated don't get infected in this model. Don't get infected, and sometimes after you are infected, you recover and you have natural immunity after that. So you get this green box. And for some very few people who cannot survive, they unfortunately die and they get a black box. Okay, so this is the visualization that I want to design. And what we are going to do is we are going to sort of model the spread, and we are going to check different things like depending on vaccination probability, how does the disease progress, and so on. Okay, so again, this is the answer, but you can see that these are 3 time stops. So this is the initial time stop where most of the population was healthy to start with. Then you had a case where almost all of the population got infected, but a lot of them also recovered. And then in the end, the disease has completely gone away now. Most of the people were infected and have recovered. Some of them were vaccinated, and some of them did not survive the epidemic. Okay, so this kind of modeling is what we are going to try and visualize. So for doing that, the first thing that we need to understand is how to make this grid. So again, this is quite decorative. So I would just I would urge you to maybe look at it later to try and understand how exactly all of these things work. Right now, I will just go through it fairly quickly. Okay, so so you need something called a color map. So a color map is given values between some numbers. It tells you what color to give. and the bounds of the color map are given in a list like this. So suppose say your bound is between -1 and 1. So -1 to 0 is the first color, and 0 to 1 is the second color. Okay, then you can give this normalization command, and you can plot your color map based using this IMShow. Okay, this IMShow function, which is image show. So basically what we are doing is sort of making pixels in some sense, and each pixel has some value between this -1 and 1, and based on that it is either given a red color or a gray color. So what is this data that you're making? So the data that you're making in this case is simply a 20 by 20 random number grid, and instead of going from 0 to 1, I've subtracted 0.5, so it goes from -0.5 to +0.5. So you would expect half of them to be less than 0, half of them to be more than 0. Okay. So yeah, and then finally, I want to also draw the grid lines, which you can do using this particular command, which is how to draw the grid. And then there are some labels for the X and Y, which are called ticks. So you can set ticks from whatever -0.5. So we want to go from 0 to 20, right? So that's our the length of our array. So so basically I want 0 to fall in the middle and not at the end. So that's why I'm starting from -0.5, and you go all the way to the maximum. So that's how you set the ticks. So this is something you shouldn't spend too much time trying to understand this. It's just something. It's just some way of doing this visualization. Okay, so it's not the physics or the mathematics of this is not super important, but I just want to show you what exactly we are doing. All right. So so now let's start with doing our realistic simulation. Let me also. Yeah. Okay. Good. So we started. So instead of having this grid size given by hand every time, I'm just going to use a variable called grid size and then use that everywhere. Okay. So we have this data, which is basically just random numbers 10 by 10 grid. Okay. And then I'm choosing randomly one out of this grid to say that this is patient 0, that this is the first person who got infected. Okay, so the way I do this is quite simple. I just draw a random number. This is between 0 and 1. I multiply it by grid size. So now it is between 0 and grid size, and I take the floor of it. So the floor function is if you have say 1.3, then the floor of 1.3 is 1. If you have 2.5, the floor of 2.5 is 2. So it's essentially the lower whole number from there. Okay. So basically that's how I get my X and Y. So just some random X and Y, and I set that person to have to be infected essentially. Okay. And then so we have the same color map as before, and you can see what that looks like. And in this particular random number draw, this is the person who was infected. Okay, we can run it a few more times and you'll find a different person who was infected, and so on. Okay. You run it every single time, you get a different person. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to perform one step of infection. Okay. And the way you do it is to look at this. Okay. So you first find the neighbors of the person who was infected, and mark them as infected with certain probability. Okay, and this probability is essentially given by a number which is often called R0. Okay, so R0 is in effect the probability of how many people does one person infect. So if you have R0 time, so you remember we did this, this, right? So probability of x less than x0 is x0. So that is what we're going to use. So if the probability is some p, then you draw a random number and you compare it with this p. And if the random number is smaller than p, then you accept, right? How do you design this p for our case? Yeah. So again, since this is the p follows a distribution with R0, so this is how you get the probability. And if R0 is very high, I don't want the number to be more than 1, so I've put this minimum requirement. So if you have a very high R0, then the maximum probability that you can get is just 1. Okay. So because you have 4 nearest neighbors for every cell, right? So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I start by generating already 4 numbers that you need to compare to. Okay. And then 4 numbers that you're going to draw to compare the probability with. So for each neighbor, you compare your acceptance. So this was the random number that you drew later with the probability. And if you're accepting, then you mark the new neighbor as also infected. Okay. And you do this for all neighbors. So this is the neighbor I-1j. So that means, so these are i's, these are j's. So I-1 same j means this guy. I+1 same j means this guy. Same I, j-1 means this guy, and same I, j+1 means this guy. Okay, so you run through all 4 of them. Okay, so that gives you the new value of the grid. Okay, so you can plot now. So the first guy was just here, and you perform this 1 step of infection. And you can see in the next step, you have these guys who are also infected. So I think I took a very high R. So R was 2. So a lot of people got infected. If R was smaller, we need to first reset. And let's put another one. Okay. So this is your step 0. And if your R is 1, everybody's getting infected. Okay, maybe it's just statistical that everybody's getting infected this time.
But at R equal to 2, even the diagonals will get affected, right?
We are not actually calculating the probability of getting diagonals. So each step only gives you the nearest neighbors.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So if you run it one more time, in fact, you can just do this here. Then you see that some other people got infected. So this guy didn't get infected, but these people got infected. You can run it one more time, and you see some other people got infected, and so on. So there's a probability of each cell getting infected based on the probability of its neighbors. Okay. Yeah. So you can change. Yeah.
What if the person is on the borderlines? Like there are not 4 people in its surrounding then?
Yeah. So that person is lucky and does not have as much probability of infection. So in our simple case, yeah.
But in the code, do we need to make changes like we defined for j-1, j+1, I-1?
Yeah. So you need to check that. Yeah. So you remember when I go to I-1, I check first of all that I is greater than 0. So if I is 0 and you want to try to set something for I-1, then you're going to get an out of bounds error, right? So if your infected guy is at the border, then it does not have an I-1 neighbor to infect.
Okay, so that loop will not run. It will
Yeah,
skip.
exactly. So this line of code will not run for that case.
Okay.
Yeah. So in fact, I will show you the example later on, and you will see some nice examples where everybody surrounding a person is either cured or vaccinated, and that person escapes getting infected. So so I don't know if you've heard of this idea called herd immunity, which is that enough people are immune to the disease so that the rest of the people who have not even been vaccinated are still safe, because the disease cannot progress and cannot reach them. So yeah, so this was okay. So this is then now the next step. Okay, so now the next thing that I want to add is the probability that maybe some cell is going to die. Okay, so there are multiple ways of doing it. We could have done it just with the probability like before, but I'm going to make it slightly more complicated. So this is just to show that you can have more complicated models than the simplest one. Okay, so in this case, what we are going to do is we are going to, for each cell, we are going to count how many infected neighbors it has. Okay, so you start with 0. And then for each, when you're trying to determine whether the neighbor is going to be infected by the cell or not, you also count whether or not the neighbor is already infected. Okay, so if the neighbor, so that means the number that is in that cell is already less than 0, then you count the number of neighbors that are infected as +1. Okay, so you do this for all 4 cases again. And what I'm saying is that it's only if your number of infected neighbors is more than 2. So in the final case, it's going to be more than 3. But for our example right now, if the number of neighbors is more than 2, then I set the value to some other number, and I say that this number corresponds to people who are dead. Okay, so then I change my color map and add one more category called black. I could put this to 2. And these are the people who are dead. Okay, so we can see what that looks like. Okay, so we ran the infection for a few cases, right? So the next case had the infection spreading further, and then some people who are inside this blob were marked as dead because so that was the criteria that we chose. Okay. So now let's come to the actual model that we want to write. Okay. So this is the probabilities that we are choosing. Okay. So every infected person can infect R0 neighbors on average. Okay. Every infected person that is surrounded by 3 other infected persons dies with the probability of PD. Okay. So I still have the 3 neighbor criteria, but not everybody who has 3 infected neighbors dies, but dies with the probability of PD. Okay. Every infected person can recover in the next day with the probability of PR. Okay, and recovered persons cannot get reinfected. And then finally, that healthy people who are vaccinated, we have certain probability PV. So just with time, more and more people are going to be vaccinated. And once vaccinated, the person remains immune. So this is the game that we want to design. So we start by making our grid and picking a random patient 0. Okay. And then we write this one-step function. So this is just one step of one time step, like we did also for the gravity case. We just had one time step. So each time step you start, you run over the full grid, I and j. For each I and j, if the person is healthy to start with, then you first see whether that person is going to be vaccinated. So now, so what I've chosen now is -1 is infected, -2 is dead, +2 is vaccinated, and +3 is people who have been cured. Okay, so anything that is greater than 0 are people who cannot be infected. 0 can be infected, and anything less than 0 are people who are either already infected or dead. Okay. So yeah. So yeah.
Why there is PV greater than np.random.range?
It's just the other way. We normally chose it like this, right? PV is the probability. So this is the f of x that we had. And then if you draw a random number, the number being less than PV is PV. So this is using this uniform criteria, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, so basically we are saying that this person is healthy. What is this person vaccinated or not? Okay, so if the probability of vaccination is 0.5, then you want to say half the times that he is vaccinated, half the time that he is not. So how you do that is you just draw a random number, ask if it is less than 0.5. You know that the probability of that happening is also 0.5. So then you mark that person as vaccinated. Okay, so that's essentially just using the acceptance rejection that we did before, right? Then you check whether the person is healthy or cured or vaccinated or dead. In these cases, you don't have to do anything more. That person is out of the system. So you check either that the person is, if the value that the person carries is more, I should say cell carries is more than 0 or less than -1, then you continue and go to the next cell, okay? Else, so now we are in the case where you have the only option that remains now is that the cell is -1, which means that the person is infected. So then we do the same thing as before.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt again.
Yeah.
Before we like design that data I and j, if it is less than 1, then the person is infected. Now
No,
here we are
equal to
taking as
-1 is
dead.
infected. In equal to -1 is less than -1 is dead.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we have basically eliminated all options. So the person is, if it is vaccinated, that's eliminated. If the person is already cured or already dead, that person has been eliminated. So the only case that we have left is where the person is infected. So that's the only thing that we're continuing with the loop now. Okay, so then we do the same thing as we did before, right? Except one more thing that we need to add, that we know that the person is infected. So yeah, so we just want to let the person be cured with a certain probability, right? So this is, yeah, it's not necessary actually to do this, but anyway. So yeah, I went through several iterations of the code, so this is some remnant of the old code, but you could have also just had PR, that's fine. So if your random number is less than PR, that's the probability of recovery. Let's remove this and see what happens. Then the person recovers and gets a code 3, okay? And then you count the neighbors as before, you infect the neighbors as before. And if your number of neighbors is greater than 3, then the person dies with a probability PD, okay? And the code for death is -2. Okay, so this is your time step. Okay, and because now things are getting very complicated, I did 2 more things. So I put a reset function, which just gives you this data, this random data, and I also wrote this count function, which essentially counts the number of infected, number of healthy, number of dead, and number of immune. Okay. So the way you count that is number of infected is, yeah, if the data is less than -2, then you count dead. Else if data is less than 0, you count infected, else everybody else is healthy. So actually, yeah, okay. So there's, I haven't counted immune separately. Everybody else is healthy right now. So you can add later on the immune case separately. Okay, so let's, yeah.
Why have we used plus equal to?
Oh, this just means n dead is equal to n dead plus 1. That's a short form of writing. If x equal to x plus 1, then you write x plus equal to 1.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So let's run this for a toy case. Okay, so we are going to run it for one particular case, and this gives you the example that I showed you before. So so one thing that you want to remember is that if you want to have multiple copies of arrays, so remember when we do these kind of iterative things, we always start with one value, then at the end we assign the new value to the old, and then the new value to the old, and then rerun, right? So you remember this iterative thing that we do. So when you want to do this with arrays, often what Python does is that if you just say data equals data old, what it will do is instead of making a whole copy in the memory, it will just say that data old is the same as, it points to the same old memory location, right? So you don't get this effect of an T0 step and T+1 step, okay? So that is why you need to use this np.copy to make sure that there is a different copy in a different memory location. So this is something that is useful. So yeah. Okay, so then you start with certain initial values. So there's R0, there's probability of recovery, probability of death, and probability of vaccination. Okay, so these are some values that I chose. And I want two snapshots at time equals 5 and time equals 20, so we can compare. Okay, so that's why I have these two things that have been initialized. And then you just do this. Okay, so then each time you get the new data, it gets assigned to data, and then redo. Okay. And if your time step is 5 or 20, then you copy it to a separate location. And then this is just the same CMap that we did before. And I want 3 instances. One was for after 5 iterations. So the first and second iteration are quite boring, right? There is nothing much to see. So we'll plot it for 5, for 20, and at the end of our run. So our run is 100 iterations. Okay. So these are the 3 plots that we are going to do. And I showed you this is sort of what it looks like. So you started somewhere, and then the infection spread. Some people recovered, some people are already vaccinated. And then as time goes on, more people get infected and recover. Some people pass away. And you can see here that there are certain cells here that are still not infected. Unfortunately, in this case, we did not get a case where people were safe. Okay, so maybe we can run it with more vaccinated people. Yeah. So in this case, you see what happens. So a lot of your population is vaccinated, right? And then you had some illness and some people recovered, but it really did not affect the rest of the population. And eventually everybody just got vaccinated or cured, nobody died. Right? So this is the case where you have lots of vaccinations. You can have, you can play with these probabilities. Let's try this. Yeah. Okay. So there are some cases here. You will see there are these people who are surrounded by vaccinated people, and so they are never going to get infected, right? So there are some people who never get infected even in the end of the run. They'll probably eventually get vaccinated, but yeah. So that's how this works. Okay. And you can see, so this is printing how many dead, how many, let me see, what does it print? Count, what is count? Oh, number of infected, number of dead, and number of healthy. Okay, so at the end of the epidemic, there are no more infected people. There are 3 people who died, and 397 people are healthy. So this is a 20 by 20 grid. So out of 400, so these were your statistics. Okay, so we can play with different values of R0. and they give you different answers. Okay, so if your R naught is small, then the infection spreads a bit slower. If your R naught is 0, is an interesting case. Is less than 1. Okay, so you can see that if your R naught is 0, what happens is, so follow the green ones. The green ones are people who've been infected and then recovered, right? So if your R naught is very small, then not very few people get infected. So a lot of people just escape being infected altogether. So even though this guy is red, in the next few iterations, everybody around him is either are all immune, either because they're vaccinated or because they have recovered. So this guy still cannot infect anybody else. So will probably recover, and that will be your final answer. Okay, so these were small grids, which are not statistically very good to make predictions. So you can make larger grid sizes, but we are not going to plot them anymore. Okay, so with grid sizes, you can just run them using this one-step function that we had, and you count how many infected, dead, and healthy people you are for both cases and plot them. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Right, so these are so these are the cases that we're going to say. So let's say R naught is 1. Okay. Probability of recovery is 10%. Probability of death is 5%. Probability of vaccination is 1%. And we are going to compare two cases where nobody was vaccinated or some people were vaccinated. So this probability of vaccination is still small, but we're going to compare these two cases. Okay, so the first case is with this 0.0, and the second case is with this small vaccination probability. And as before, we have these three arrays where we are just going to append the numbers that we get in time, and then we are going to plot them essentially. So we want to plot them as a fraction of the total number of people. So the total number of people is always infected plus dead plus healthy. Yeah, so I also, so since you're going through this time loop, okay, so I deleted that part. But what you can do is you can put a condition here is to break the time loop when infection is 0. Okay, you can say or, and once your infection goes to 0, then you can stop your time loop. Okay, so this is what you can do. So now all your arrays are filled using this step function iterated over time, and you can now plot both these cases. The first case is where we had no vaccinations. The second case is where we had vaccinations. So I set the title, and these are the three things that we're going to plot: infected, dead, and recovered. Okay, so you can plot that, and you can see that, so this is how the curves look. Okay, so let me remove this infected equal to 0 for now. Okay, good. So so you can see what is happening. So let me make this figure smaller. I think it's too big for us to see. That's here. Okay. Still doesn't fit. It fits on the screen now. All right. So basically, if you have no vaccinations, you start with almost 0 infected cases, which rises and then goes down again as expected. If you have no vaccinations, then you have the number of dead that rises and then stabilizes at a particular value. And then these are the number of healthy people. So almost everybody was healthy in the beginning. Then you had a dip where a lot of people were either infected or dead. And then you had some people recover. So the number of healthy went up. And then this is your stable value. So with no vaccinations, you have at the end of the epidemic, you have about 80% people who are still healthy and about 20% who died. And if you have vaccinations, remember our vaccination probability was quite small, but still, even with that, with vaccinations, you have an epidemic that starts, you hit a peak quite early, and then the number of infections go to zero quite fast. And you can see that the number of dead people is quite small. Okay, so this essentially illustrates what we know by we can repeat this for a higher R naught, and we can see what that looks like. Changed. We can also increase this just to make it a bit dramatic. Okay. Yeah, so I just made the disease a bit more deadly. So it infects more people and it also kills more people than before. Okay, and the probability of vaccination is the same and the recovery is also the same. So we again do the same thing. We compare the two cases, and you can see that the change then in this case can be quite drastic. So with vaccinations, you have much faster. The rate of infection going to zero is much faster, and the number of people who are dead is also much smaller.
Okay. There is a question in the chat. That, by increasing fatality rate, it will end the epidemic sooner. So can we observe this?
Yeah, sure. If you want to kill everybody, let's do that. So actually, there's already a built-in mechanism here that we only allow cells that have at least 3 infected neighbors to die. So you can remove that as well, and you can work purely based on probability. There you go. Okay, so let me do something. Let me remove the let me comment out this guy. Okay, because what is happening is which one is it? So what is happening is that because the vaccinated case, the epidemic ends a bit earlier, so it sort of biases this n infinity thing. So let me remove that, and then we just have the one plot. Okay, so we see this is 158. Let's start with a smaller value. See where we are. And 49. And it's pretty much the same. I think it's biased because we have this three nearest neighbors condition. So to see what you are saying, we need.
No, but when probability of dying is increased, probability of recover also will change, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. So the point is that it's still not. It's just in the next step. It's not integrated over time, right?
Okay.
So
And
yeah,
I think you can increase that infected rate also and simultaneously increase the death rate. That
yeah. So
will
again,
increase the fatality.
again in this simplified model, because you have only 4 nearest neighbors, increasing R naught a lot does not make a big difference, because eventually you just hit the probability maximum of 1. So once your R0 is 4, basically you don't really gain anything by increasing R naught further. So then you would have to have so I did a 2 by 2 grid because it was easier to see, but you could do this, you could do this in a n cross n system, for example. And then you have even more neighbors and so on. So then the system will be slightly even more different. So I mean,
Can that increased death rate be seen in the grid?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Okay. There. Okay, so this was already with a lot of vaccination. Let me put the vaccine. So this was. Okay. Let's go to the earlier one. Let's not. So this was with R naught equals 1. Let's put 0. This is what happens if you have a large death rate.
Okay, so still there will be pockets where people survive, and you can still see that some people are still lucky not getting infected at all. There are 3 people in the last breed.
Yeah.
So this is like the earlier part of civilization. So
Yeah, I mean, so that you can in fact put the vaccination rate to 0 and you can see what happens. So then you have, this is the case.
So there are still survivors.
Yeah, of course. I mean, then for that, then you have to put your recovery rate to 0 as well. So then these corners are living because they just have fewer neighbors.
But if we increase the recovery rate, then probably things are better, even say 0.2 or something like that.
Yeah. So the thing is that this is just for the next step. So it's not a time averaged recovery. So in fact, if you do this as 0.8, then let's see what happens. You see that if the recovery rate is very high, then still you have the epidemic goes away quite quickly. And this is probably this is modeling normal flu. Like almost everybody recovers from flu, right? So yeah, so you can fit these numbers based on real data if you're interested and see how well this model does. I did not do this. I did not want to make it too real, but I wanted to give you a taste of how these kinds of models are built. So this is one kind of model that is based on cellular automata, and the other kind of model is based simply on differential equations. So I have this question for you for the tutorial, which is to write a much simpler version of this system, where you have, so instead of disease, what you have is, say, growth of a coral reef system. So you know that corals grow on top of each other, right? So you can make nice patterns emerge if you just have the simple rule that if a cell has 2 neighbors that are already corals, then that cell can also become a coral. Okay, so so for that, of course, for it to kickstart the process, you need to start with at least 2 live corals in a 3 by 3 square, and you can also modify the nearest neighbor criteria to not just include 4, but also to include the diagonal neighbors. So then you have 8 neighbors instead of 4. So you can have this simple system and see see how corals grow in a particular time step. So some n time steps, and you can see how it grows. So yeah, okay. Right. All right. So now we go to the second method of simulating this system, and this is using differential equations. Okay. So here you need certain variables that I defined here. So of course we need the number of infected people, dead people, cured people, and vaccinated people as before. And I'm calculating this n susceptible, which is the number of people who can get infected in the future, right? So if you have total number of people is n tot, then the number of susceptible people are people who are not already dead or vaccinated or cured or infected. Okay. So then this is the system of equations that we need to solve. So how does the number of infections change? We know it has to be proportional to the number of people available to be infected, that's NS, and it also has to be proportional to the number of people who are already infected. So if you have no person infected, of course, there's going to be no new persons infected. So you're not generating anything new. And this coefficient, I'm just calling it as Ri. Then you have the death rate as before. So this I call RF, or fatality rate. At times, only the number of people who are infected affect this. Similarly, you have the number of cured. Again, only the number of people who are infected affect this in this way. And finally, you have number of vaccinated people, which is a constant number in time. So any government can vaccinate only so many people per day. So that's just a constant number. Okay. Like before, you can set up some initial values. So you need some small number of infections to start off the epidemic. And you can make an input array out of all of these initial conditions. So you have number of infected, dead, cured, vaccinated, and susceptible. And then you have an array of these coefficients. So this Ri is essentially what we called R0 in the previous case. Then you have Rf, which was Rd in the previous case, then Rc and Rb as before. And so then I also made an array of this input, all of these Rs. Okay, and then we write our step in the same way as before. Now we need to only pass two arrays: one array with the number of people and one array with the parameters of the model, okay, the R's, and then there is a time step. So this is just a sanity check condition. If at any point of time the number of infected becomes less than 0, then you exit, and you generate the new values. So at T1, so this is essentially T0 and T1. N0s correspond to T0, N1s correspond to T1. And then this is just these equations that we talked about. So the new number of infected are the old number of infected plus R0 times the number of susceptible times the number of infected times dt. Okay, and similarly for the others, for the death, you have the death rate times the number of infected. For recovery, you have the recovery rate times number of infected. And finally, for the for the vaccinated, you have the number of vaccinated before, and this is slightly different because you're only going to vaccinate people who are not either who are not infected already or not dead, or who have not already recovered. Okay, so it depends on this susceptibility number, and again, so this was again a sanity check. In certain runs, this N0 becomes negative, so you want to stop when that happens. So you only choose, so you choose 0. So if this becomes negative, then you are not vaccinating any more new people. Okay, so this is your step. It looks much simpler than the previous case, and we can again do the same run. So you start with a small number of infected, and your total susceptible population is 1. So this should be 0.999, but yeah, I don't care that much. So it should be something like this, and then you can start. And you see that you, in the beginning you have, so this is all now in terms of fractions, everything goes between 0 and 1, okay? So yeah, you start with a very small fraction of people who are infected, then the infection starts picking up, then it grows very rapidly, and it maximizes where everybody is infected essentially, okay? So let's increase this a bit. This is, let me change the figure size. Okay, good. So let's say that our x-axis is number of days. Then this is how it progresses. Right now we just have one thing happening where you have R0 of 1 and all the other coefficients are 0. Okay, so this is just to observe the effect of the first equation. Then you can start adding other things. Okay, so now you add some fatality, but now still there is no vaccination or recovery. So so this is still, R0 is still 1. Your fatality rate is 5%, and you can plot again, and you see this is what it looks like. Okay, so eventually you start, the infection is small, then it grows exponentially. As people get infected, also more people start dying, and eventually you have the whole population dying, and nobody's infected anymore because people are dead. Okay, good. So this is the second case. Then we can start having some people cured. Okay, so then you add a third coefficient, which is, say, 20% people recover. Then you can. So this is what happens. So you have the infection, the epidemic peaking at, say, day 80 or so, and then most people recover and some people die. Okay, so this is, so in this one, actually, I think we can see what was said earlier, that the epidemics ends fast if the death rate is very high. Something went wrong. There's more people dead than. Okay, but yeah. So essentially on day 150 or so, we have this. Yeah, it seems a bit odd. Let's see if we can figure out what's happening here. Yeah, I think we just need to put a condition here that says if n equal to n or okay, let's see what happens with that. Let's first do our sanity check. Sorry. Okay, good. So the sanity check works. Okay, good. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I need to figure out why this is happening. Does anybody understand what is going on? Should have
So
stopped.
here what we are doing is everybody who is infected ultimately dies, right?
Yeah. No, but I want it to stop when everybody is dead. So, I mean, the equations will keep
Right.
solving themselves, right? But I have
Right.
to put a stopping condition, which I thought this should do. But
So when susceptible number becomes less than 0,
so that I already did. So it should stop. No, wait, hold on. So this should be 4. Okay, let's try. Yeah, this I did not want to do because it doesn't fully. It sort of, it makes it something weird.
there is also a recovery rate shown, right?
Yeah.
So, but that will not be the case, correct?
No, in this case there is. So that is fine. That's not the problem. The problem is that this thing is maximizing at 1.4, which I don't understand why.
But why will people recover if they are dying?
I see what you mean. Okay. So this should be more complicated. Okay, so the equations are too simple. So we need, so this is 0. Okay, let's. Okay, that's what you said just now. Okay, this one works as expected. Right. Now it's even worse. Okay. Yeah. So it's yeah. Okay. Let me figure it out later,
Okay, fine,
and then
fine.
yeah, it'll be. Okay. Let's not do that.
Can we quickly check the differential equation?
Yeah. So let me just finish this final comparison with and without vaccination, and then we'll go there. Okay. Okay, good. So let me change the size of this guy. Okay. Yeah. So this was the case where you have some vaccination. Okay. So this NV is non-zero, or rather RV is non-zero, and then you see that eventually most of the people are vaccinated, and your infection again goes to 0. Okay. And then this final case is where you have all all of the non-zero, all of the coefficients to be non-zero. So we say R0 is 1, fatality rate is 5%, recovery rate is say 40%, and let's say vaccination rate is 10%. And you can see that eventually, so you have fewer deaths. Yeah, so you were saying something about seeing the differential equations?
Differential equation. So,
here.
yeah, so here the rate of increase of infected people depends on susceptible and already infected. Okay.
Yes.
And this rate of this RF we have made 1, right?
It's not 1, but we can make it 1.
I mean, no, in that where we are trying to show that everybody dies.
Yeah. So actually it is not necessary. So if there are no recoveries, then eventually everybody dies.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So in this case.
But rate of infection can still be reduced, right?
Yeah. So you can make this smaller. The curve looks different.
Okay. So the difference between this case and the grid cases, in grid case you are looking at an individual, whereas here you are talking only in terms of numbers.
Yes, only statistical properties.
Only statistical property, yeah. And in the grid case, then see, in the grid case, you are also looking at the people who have saved because they formed a pocket.
Yeah.
So that can't be seen in this kind of.
That phenomena specifically you cannot see here, but you will have some people who will escape infection in the end.
Okay, because of that probability.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there is some normalization thing which I will fix and I will send you the notebook. I still haven't figured out what the topic is, but
yeah, right. But this also can be given small exercise, and in part of tutorial can be done.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, not the you have already given tutorial about this Corel problem.
Yeah, the Corel problem is one possible tutorial. This another thing that I had in mind was, so all of these quantities are cumulative, right?
Right.
And in the newspapers, we see daily quantities. So you can extract essentially daily quantities, and I'll give you the answer also quite quickly.
F of x dx.
Well, I mean, so these second terms are essentially your daily quantities, right?
Right.
So yeah, you can essentially extract your daily quantities from this and see how they look.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
What if we want to take into account the population density in that pixel plot?
All of these things of this first guy, the probability of infection. So if you have a dense population, the probability of infection is high. Right? If you have a sparse population, that is why people talk about social distancing, because it decreases this value of R0. So this is not a part of this model. So for that, you have to have a different model saying, say this is the probability. So suppose, so then you have to say what is the probability of two people being in touch with each other, and what is the probability of the transmission in every contact, say in every 1 minute contact, and then what is the probability of having such 1 minute contacts, and then you can figure out a model for R0 if you like. But that is not part of this. Here you have this R0 that is given. So in fact, another thing that you can do
so in that case we may have a pocket of high density, pocket of low density.
Yeah.
That is one thing, and also a factor that people from this place can travel to that place, maintaining the same density. So that additional factor will also come, no? Because as people are traveling,
Yeah.
so they are carrying some infected people from
Yeah.
one area to another.
Yeah. So yeah, you
that-
can build multiple extremely complicated models.
Yeah, that
as
becomes
you
really
like.
complicated.
Exactly. Yeah, but these kinds of coupled differential equations can be used for a lot of things. So they are used for weather systems, for example. They are used for yeah, I mean, any place where you have these changing populations or changing quantities that depend on each other, you can use that. Okay, so officially we stop here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
So there are no immediate questions on the chat.
Yeah, so actually the earlier version of this code I had was instead of having these as fractions, I actually had them as numbers, and then I was dividing them by this total number of. So I think that does not have this problem of normalization. So maybe I'll try that out again, and hopefully that should work.
There is a question here. And he has asked how we finally present the simulation. Can you show some previous work now?
What does that mean? I did not understand the
Anshul, you
question.
can ask directly.
Yeah, ma'am, I want to ask that we are making the simulation, so we want to present them to somewhere. So how we do that?
What do
Or
you mean by
like-
present? What exactly do you want to? So one thing, for example, you can say is that if you're a policymaker, you could say to the government that this is the vaccination rate that we need to achieve, because my projections show that if this is the vaccination rate, then we will end the epidemic on this day. But at the current rate, the epidemic will end on this day, and these more people will die. So you can make statements like this. But what do you mean by presenting your simulation?
so we give the whole code, or we just show the graph, or like
Depends on what you want to do. No, if you're talking to a politician, showing him the Python code makes no sense. Why would you show him the code?
yeah, so we show the graphs.
You can show the graphs, or you can say these are the numbers that we get. So it depends on where you are presenting. If you're presenting to your presenting it as your bachelor project, then of course you need to show them the code and explain what you're doing and show multiple graphs with different parameters. So like we did sanity checks, right? We did the sanity infection rate and nothing else, and this is what it looks like. And then we said, okay, we have infection rate and death rate, and this is what it looks like. So yeah, so you can build it up step by step based on what you're doing. So it depends on where you're presenting it.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we can then end this session and meet in the afternoon session for tutorials, and we'll continue tomorrow with the new problem from ma'am.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.